Welcome to Small Arm Solutions. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite guns, the Beretta M9. Recently I've been on the internet myself, and I've been looking at what people have to say. There is so much misinformation out there on the M9, what it is, what it isn't, what's happened out there, that it's really unbelievable. So we're going to talk about today is what actually happened with the M9, what's true and what's not, what's factual and what's not. I've dedicated many years to the studying of the Beretta pistol. I got my first one in 1989, 1990, and I followed this pistol right through. I had one in the military I carried, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that. And we're going to talk about the slide failures. We're going to talk about locking blocks, and we're going to talk about what's actually caused the problems with it over in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we're going to talk also a little bit about the differences between an actual M9 pistol and the M9 Special Editions that Beretta has right now, because the pistols are not the same. They're not supposed to be. Beretta did make some changes on them to make sure that they'd be able to tell the difference between an actual U.S. military pistol and a commercial look-alike. So we're going to dive right into that. Starting with some of the history of the M9 and the M9 program. Back in the early 1980s, the U.S. military was looking for a pistol to replace the aging M1911. Now, I know there's a lot of M1911 fans out there, and there's nothing that you can say that's going to make them think that this was a proper move, but we're going to talk about what the actual military was looking at the time. First and foremost, the 1911s, the last shipment of 1911s was in the 50s. So all the current pistols in U.S. inventory were put together from, God knows how many pistols out there to try to make one that worked. The pistols were heavily worn. Most of them probably saw service in Vietnam. It was time, but there's also something else. NATO was formed. And part of what NATO did was they wanted to do a standardization of small arms ammunition that would be particular to all members of NATO, which makes sense. For instance, a U.S. unit was in trouble in a hot spot that the U.S. couldn't resupply. One of our allies could actually drop in pistol, rifle, machine gun ammunition to them, and they would be back in action. So parts commonality was a big deal. And the NATO caliber was the 9x19, or the 9mm Luger. The 9mm Luger, again, it never had a very good popularity, in the fact that it was not as good of a man stopper as the 45. You're looking at a 9mm NATO cartridge, which is a 124 grain projectile, about 1185 foot a second, which is actually plus P on the SAMI standards. But the actual NATO cartridge, that is the specifications, and it would be a plus P. Of course, you're comparing it to a 230 grain ball, which is generally around 900 something foot a second in that area, which again, you're going to be hit with something that's the size of a softball versus the size of a golf ball. Well, there's a couple of different schools of thought on this. The M9, when it first went into rotation with the U.S. military, they found that the majority of the people were qualifying on the first time, which they were not with the 1911. So now we ask the question: is it better to have a 45 caliber miss, or have a 9mm which you have to hit 2 or 3 times? If your soldier's actually going to perform better with a 9mm, he's going to actually hit the target. Where if he has the heavier recoil, he's not going to hit the target because of the recoil. And that was categorically proven in the U.S. military. But at the same point, when the M9 was adopted, there wasn't a lot of joy about it. And most of it was from the guys who liked the M1911. The U.S. military is very big on, on its history and on its way it's always been done. They were going to accept no handgun, period, that was a 9mm. So let's put that on the table right now. There were certain people within the military that would never accept a 9mm pistol. So it didn't matter how good the pistol was, because it wasn't 45, it just wasn't going to happen. So getting into the actual trials, companies were Beretta, SIG, Smith & Wesson, Colt, Ruger. There may be some other ones I can't recall right now. The first run of tests, none of the American handguns survived the test. None of them. The only 2 pistols that actually survived the test were the Beretta and the SIG. So the first trials, again, we're not talking about pistols that were compromised for price. When the actual test came back from the Beretta 92 and the SIG P226, the pistols came in equal. So now we go out for price bidding between the two. Well, how the Beretta actually won was the pistols were actually the same price. Beretta came in just lower on the maintenance package and magazines than SIG did. That was the deciding factor. There was no U.S. base in Italy that a lot of people like to talk about, that was the reason for it. There was no politics that went involved with it. It came down to the numbers. During all the tests that came through, these guns fought neck and neck, and they both succeeded. The American guns had failed, all of them. So Beretta was awarded the contract in 1985 and started making shipments. Well, this didn't sit very well with the American companies. So the American companies actually did a counter lawsuit against the government, and they got their retrial. They claimed Beretta had used guns that were not production guns. They were specially hand-picked guns. So during the retrial, they actually picked guns out of the inventory, and oddly enough, very few of those companies even came to compete, the ones that are actually involved in the lawsuit. Test went through again. The Beretta M9 came out to be the winner. So during the testing, the Beretta was one of the most proven guns throughout the world. They're used all over the world, militaries throughout the world. The reputation was impeccable. The design was solid, it was reliable, it was durable, it was accurate. And none of that saying that the SIG was not. Again, we're looking at two guns that were on equal playing fields. But there has to be a winner. The first hiccup with the M9s was the 6 slide failures, which caused a complete uproar within the U.S. military community. However, these actual failures, where the slides actually separated and came off the frame, nobody was seriously injured, definitely nobody was killed. This happened to a particular Navy SEAL unit. And there was a letter that was put out that was saying that we're going to change slides on Beretta every 1,000 rounds or so until it was investigated. This is a story a lot of people like to really bring up to say that the M9 pistol was not durable and reliable. So we're also going to put a stop to that right now too, with the actual facts of what happened. First of all, the pistols that were fired had excessive amount of rounds through them. Second of all, there was an issue with ammunition that came to find. A lot of people want to tell you that it was 9mm submachine gun ammunition that was being used that caused the fractures. That was not the case. The actual case was some of the first production 9mm ball ammunition. When Winchester went into production of this ammunition, they had kept the powder charges, but they had modified the 9mm cartridge case to a military configuration. Military configuration is a thicker brass. The powder cup sits up higher. So what that caused was excessive pressures. Basically, this basic ammunition was being brought up to nearly proof pressures. So you have an aluminum alloy frame pistol that was shooting ammunition that was near proof pressures. So eventually, with this extremely high round count, the pistol had failed. Also documented at that same time were SIG Sauer P226s that had frames crack on them. So the warning went out, changed slides out, everything went back to Beretta to have the pistol checked. Metrology came back that there was nothing wrong. So if there was nothing wrong, what actually caused these failures? So what happened was I looked at the ammunition. When the ammunition was tested, they found out what the ammunition problem was. So now comes the fix. And this is actually a very interesting story as well. Once the problem was identified that it was ammunition related, there was concern for the safety of the people who were using these pistols. And again, this was nothing to do with the actual M9 pistol themselves, because they didn't know how much of this ammunition was out there. So to prevent the slides from actually exiting off of the frame, if this was ever to happen again, there were some modifications that were done. And oddly enough, this was done at the U.S. government's expense, because the problem was not with Beretta, it was not with the design, it was not with the pistol. It was a problem that was caused by ammunition. Shown on the left here is an original M9 slide. And shown on the right is a modified M9 slide that was done after this issue was found. If you notice, there's actually a track right here. This is the actual hammer pin of the original, which that hammer pin actually sat below here, like so. So there was no notch. The modification was an enlarged hammer pin. So if that slide was to fail, it would come back and it would catch right here, and it would prevent the slide from actually fracturing and coming off of the back of the frame itself, so nobody would be hurt. Again, I want to emphasize this was paid for by the U.S. government. There was never any retrofitting for any commercial or law enforcement or military guns other than the U.S. military. There was actually modification of slides. They did actually cut these grooves into existing slides, and they replaced the hammer pin itself so it would incorporate this device. Now another very interesting thing happened. Due to the incredible damage that was done to Beretta's reputation due to this, the U.S. government was sued by Beretta and received quite a bit of money for the damage to the reputation. Because again, this issue was not due to the Beretta pistol, but it was due to the failure on the ammunition. As of this date, slide failures are very rarely seen, and if they are, they're seen in training areas where guns are used and they're not replaced. So again, I just want to say one more time that this issue was not caused by Beretta or the pistol. The same ammunition fractured the aluminum frames on a SIG. We're going to take just a little look here at the actual M9 pistol. What we have here is an actual M9 pistol. The only difference is the frame itself. It has the M9 serial number on it, which is commercial, due to the fact that you cannot buy guns with U.S. government serial numbers. However, every single part on this gun is U.S. government. We're going to go over the gun from front to back. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the other issues that have come up with it as well. Looking at the pistol, first of all, we're going to see U.S. 9mm, and we're also going to see this PB. Well, when you compare that to the commercial pistol, you will notice how you have a very different PB. This is the commercial PB. So this basically lets you know, or lets Beretta or law enforcement know, this is not a U.S. government pistol. Because if it was, it would have this. While we're looking at slides, the slide on the top was an original Beretta Italy made pistol. When the pistol was adopted, there was basically a schedule that was in basically 5 different levels. At first, X amount of parts could be made in Italy, and then gradually as it went through time, everything had to be converted to a USA manufactured pistol. The top slide, as you can see, US 9mm P Beretta. P Beretta means Italy. This slide was actually manufactured in Italy. Here it says Beretta M9 Beretta USA. This is an American made pistol. Now we're going to flip over to the other side. Of course, we have the assembly numbers, but take a look at this etched PM. These two are U.S. military slides. This one is the commercial 9mm. It does not have that. PM means proof tested, magnetic particle inspected. That means they shot a 9mm proof cartridge, and then they went and they magnafluxed it, and they checked for stress fractures. Once it passed that, the PM is marked on there. And that is only done on U.S. military pistols for Beretta because of the fact that it's military spec. It's part of the technical data package that they have to have. All of them have the assembly numbers. You'll see the assembly numbers look a little bit different as well. This pistol here, the U.S. military one, this was actually made at a point where it was a commercial off-the-shelf. It wasn't an actual TDP built, so it didn't have to have the factory code, which is a 65490. That's Beretta's factory code. So this is a different assembly number. These two here have the actual U.S. government assembly numbers on them. All the components, the slides has it, the frame has it, the barrel has it. They all have assembly code numbers on them. We're going to disassemble the pistol now. Empty. We're going to take a look at the barrel. What you see here is a U.S. military barrel compared to a commercial barrel. You can actually see the U.S. military barrel has the PM marked as well because, again, the barrel is also mag particle and proof tested after it fires a proof cartridge. So that has to be marked. And as we stand these barrels up, you'll see the U.S. government assembly number as well. You have the assembly number and you have the factory code 65490. The actual locking blocks themselves also will have that. The locking block is something else we're going to talk to in depth. If there is somewhat of a weak link on the M9 pistol, it is the locking block. This is very similar to the Walther P38 of World War II. The locking block system, I have to say, gives a very unique feel to the gun, the recoil. Because the barrel's not actually shifting direction, you get a push feeling instead of a snap. The locking block has been probably one of the most frequently failed parts. And there's a little bit of history behind this as well that you're probably going to find very interesting. When a locking block fails, what happens is the actual locking block on the side will break. It is normally always the right. And to a properly trained armor, this doesn't really happen. Because once the locking block starts to wear, you'll see pitting on that wing. And you will know to change it. This was actually a U.S. military locking block that had failed, that I show for demonstrative purposes. But we're going to take a quick look at the locking blocks themselves. Again, in 1985, when the M9 was adopted, there was a technical data package, which means every pistol made for the U.S. military has to meet this standard. And what we have here is the first generation locking block. Well, they had found that there was ways to improve that locking block, and there was a second and third generation. Right here's what we have as a second and third generation. If you notice, there's a relief cut on both sides. That relief cut removes a lot of stress off of that, and you have an major extension on life. This one here was probably 6,000 to 8,000 rounds. This one's up to 17,000 rounds. One of my first articles I ever did as a writer, I did a 20,000 round endurance test on an M9 pistol. I was actually working for Laser Max at the time, and we were testing the spring guide for durability. So we actually had 20,000 rounds. Well, I wanted to see exactly how well this pistol would hold up. I tried to break it. The only failure I had was a locking block failure, and it was at 19,400 and something. Now, I knew probably well in 10, 12,000 rounds that this part was going to fail, but again, this was an actual failure. We wanted to see how it was going to hold up. So we just kept firing. Most of that ammunition was plus P. It was Winchester's 9mm NATO. There was quite a bit of plus P plus as well. The Federal Ranger 127 grain plus P plus, which is standard 37 Magnum, pressures. It's an extremely high pressure round. So we did everything to this pistol we weren't supposed to. And again, the new generation locking block failed at just under 20,000 rounds. That shows you the increased durability. Well, the U.S. military pistols don't have that. And the reason is because the U.S. government has to authorize a change. And they don't like doing that. So the technical data package was never changed to this updated component. So all technical data package M9 pistols still have the original locking block that fails much sooner. However, these have entered service. There's another change I want to point out in this thing as well, if you notice. When you look forward, you'll see how much narrower this slot is on the top, on the improved one. Well, as you can see, there's a lot more material on this one here versus this one. There's a much smaller pin that's used for locking and unlocking that goes into there. This also increases the strength. Well, the U.S. military, since the global war on terror, has procured significantly more M9 pistols. And they also have procured what's called COTS pistols, or commercial off-the-shelf. These are ones that do not have to meet the U.S. military mil spec. So when these pistols were sold, they had come with the new locking block. And also the M9A1, the new Marine Corps pistol, that also was equipped with the new one because there was no technical data package for the M9A1 either. It was a COTS pistol. So these did enter the service. But again, locking blocks, they've been the biggest Achilles heel. More recently, over the global war on terrorism, we've seen quite a few of them break. About 2 years ago, I was over in Afghanistan at Bagram Airfield. I was at Camp Vance, and I was in their armory. I saw quite a few of these broken locking blocks. And I work with these pistols a lot. I'm pretty much able to tell if it's a Beretta part or if it's somebody else's. It was somebody else's. I grabbed the packaging where it had a factory code on it, and it was not Beretta's. It was not their factory code. So these were made by a second, third, or fourth party vendor. Well, it was more than obvious that these locking blocks were not made to Beretta standards because they were failing at all kinds of round counts. This is one of the things that we've seen with a lot of military weapons. Excellent weapons are malfunctioning due to parts being put in them that are not made to print. And that is, with the failures of the locking blocks, is a perfect example with the M9 pistol. It's problems that were caused by putting substandard parts in them that were not the manufacturer's. The next part we're going to want to take a look at is the magazine itself. During the global war on terrorism, the M9 had suffered a lot of issues with failures to feed. The regular U.S. military magazine, made by Beretta USA, if you can see right there, you can see there's an assembly number on it as well. And if we look it up, we'll see we have an aluminum follower. These are the magazines that were provided with the pistol. Well, as more and more pistols got into the supply chain, they wanted a second source for magazines. Well, hence Checkmate Industries. So this magazine, again, also an aluminum follower. But you notice there's a different finish on there. Well, what had happened over in the sand is when the sand got inside of the magazine, the way the graininess of this finish, it would hold the sand. And when it would hold the sand, it would make the rounds jam up inside of the magazine. And when that happened, they couldn't rotate to go up the shot column to feed, cause failures. So the first thing everybody says is the Beretta 9 is a piece of garbage. It doesn't work in the sand. However, when they were getting the actual Beretta magazines, they weren't having these problems. So many units, once this was found out, they actually would only deploy with Beretta-made magazines, and they would leave the checkmates behind. This is another example, perfect example, of having a system that works. The U.S. government goes ahead and makes a change. They authorize somebody else to make it, and you can even look from the finish and from the floor plates. The technical data was changed. It's not the same. So this change in itself caused issues with the feeding problems in the sand. Well, the Marine Corps, when they decided they were going to adopt the M9A1, which was basically a M9 pistol with a 1913 rail and a modified trigger guard that was made stronger, there was actually a magazine that was designed for that pistol, designed specifically to function in the sand. It's a nickel type finish. This one here works very well with sand in it. It is a big improvement, especially with this new finish. Again, commercial off the shelf. It was not made to the TDP, so the government did not procure it. The Marines Corps did, but they did it with their own money. It wasn't bought as that kind of a product. So we do have some upgrades here that were very good for the M9. But those were the major issues that had come up in fact versus fantasy over which caused the malfunctions with a Beretta pistol. Over the years, because of people thinking about the issues with the M9 pistol slide failures, there was actually a slide developed with that in mind, which was called the Brigadier. And if we look, we'll see the standard M9 slide, the Brigadier. You can see how this is much built up in here for extended durability. So perhaps if you were to do extensive service with high pressure ammunition, this would be what you'd want to get. Also notice that the sights are actually removable, both the front and the rear. The sights on the M9, it's only removable from the rear. The front is part of the slide itself. And if you also look at the rear sight itself on the U.S. military, it is a half circle with a circle in the front. This is a 3-dot system where it has 2 dots in the rear, 1 in the front. The technical data package still calls to this day for this one here, which has the half circle in the rear and the full circle in the front. Those are some changes as well. We're going to talk just a little bit more about the differences between the commercial M9 Special Edition and the actual M9 pistols. First, we're going to take a look at the hammer itself. You can see on the hammer written there's an assembly number and a part number. Well, here's one taken out of the gun. If we look over here, this is the M9 Special Edition itself. Same numbers, but C for commercial. The actual barrels themselves, I do not have one of the actual commercial ones, but the difference is you would have a C, it would be C, and you would not have a PM on here. Or if you did have some that did have PM, it would have a C on there as well. So those are some other parts. Additionally, the inside of the grip here, you also see a part number. On the M9 Special Edition, only one of those grips will have it instead of both. Under the frame here, it's under the grip here on the frame, you also see a part number and an assembly number and factory number for the frame. So this is how that, again, Beretta and the military guns can tell the difference between a military gun and a commercial gun. I'm going to go over a little bit some of the characteristics of the M9 pistol that make the pistol very good, very reliable, very durable. We're going to do a little bit of a comparison, I guess, between the M1911 as well, of what the benefits are. First of all, the M1911 was never a safe gun to carry loaded, even cocked and locked. The U.S. government M1911 did not have any kind of a firing pin block, so if you were to drop a loaded pistol, even cocked and locked from about 5 feet onto the muzzle, there's a better than average chance it's going to go off just from the inertia of the firing pin, which again made it unsafe. And it was even more unsafe when you had a round in the chamber and you wanted to ride the hammer forward to carry it in the quarter cock position. So that was not very safe. So when they looked at the new pistol, they wanted a double action pistol. Well, Beretta, the M9, offers many of these really good features. First of all, it's a double action on the first shot. As you pull the trigger, you watch the hammer go back, bang, it fires. Then when it fires, slide comes back, forward, and now every subsequent shot is going to be single action, a short trigger pull. Now, for instance, we want to put a safety on. We have a manual safety that we can actually push down that will decock the pistol. And that does it very safely, and we're going to go over why. First of all, I want to take a look at this little piece of metal right here. As I pull the trigger all the way to the rear, now you'll notice that it starts to rise. That is what's called a passive firing pin block. That is a physical piece of metal that blocks the forward movement of the firing pin. So you could throw this up against a wall, you could drop it, whatever you want. Unless this trigger is pulled all the way to the rear, that firing pin will not be able to move forward. Now people are going to get nervous about the fact that this hammer will drop on its own. Well, I want to take a look here to show you. The firing pin is actually in two pieces. There's the actual firing pin and a plunger. If you can see right there the actual firing pin itself, that's the actual plunger. When the safety is engaged, it rolls out of position. So when that hammer drops, you have the firing pin engaged, safety engaged, and you have the firing pin being split into two. So this pistol can be loaded. Insert the magazine, back, forward. You can load the pistol with the safety engaged, or you can load it like so, and then drop it. Now the pistol can either be carried with a safety on, which disconnects the trigger bar, or you can have it ready to go in double action mode. Now we're looking at the actual open slide design. Well, some people seem to think that because this is open, it allows dirt and everything that will cause it to malfunction. Now, every test that's been done basically shows that's not the case. What makes this pistol so reliable is the fact that when the magazine is in place, the round is presented basically right into the barrel itself. There's no feed ramp that has to go up. Also, what this does is it enables you to take a magazine of a pistol that is not for the Beretta. You can hold it like this. You can drop a round in there, close the slide, fire. It'll lock back open, and you can drop the round in there as well. By having an open ejection port, it eliminates pretty much any kind of a failure to eject because there's nothing for the cartridge case to catch on. You also have a live cartridge indicator. When the trigger is, or when there's a round in the chamber, the extractor sticks out and you can see the red. Now that's a visual, but also when the pistol is loaded, at night you can feel it sticking out. So there's another wonderful feature on it as well. Of course, the barrel sticks out. I attended a Beretta Armor School, and one of my classmates in the school asked Beretta, the rep there, well, why is this done? He said, it looking nice. Well, that was the reason I was given, but it's just a look of it as well. Disassembly, very easy. Make sure the pistol is empty. Depress on the plunger, disassembling latch, drop down, slide comes forward right off the frame. Lift it over, push inward on the spring guide, remove. Now to remove the barrel, push inward on the plunger, lifts right out. No tools for maintenance at all. The last fallacy I want to go over with you in this video is the big media hype about police, the fact that the Beretta pistol can be disassembled by an assailant. Now, I've never heard of this actually happening, even being in law enforcement for 10 years as a forensic scientist. And in my research, I've never seen it. But people basically were saying an assailant could grab an officer's pistol, push inward, drop down, and pull the slide off. Now, first of all, anybody who can get that close to the pistol is a problem. Second of all, they have to have to know how to do it. Third of all, you're going to risk getting yourself shot. Well, even though it wasn't a problem, it was a perceived problem. Beretta had to respond to it. So what they did was they actually made some of these latches, and they ground this off here. So you would have to use a tool to actually push it down, so you can disassemble it. I wanted to address in this video the many, many fallacies that are out there and the many, many misnomers of what's happened with the Beretta M9 pistol. My information comes directly from the U.S. military. It comes from direct research. It comes with my experience while in the military and while working with militaries, as I do right now. I work with militaries throughout the world on weapons maintenance issues, and I get to see these weapons in the field. I have been over to Afghanistan to see what's going on as well. This is an excellent pistol. Beretta's come up with a new M9A3, which is to propose to the government as a low-cost alternative to going with a new pistol. The new M9A3 addressed most of all the concerns that the new requirements had. It also offered an ability to modify pistols at a low cost. The U.S. government has rejected it, and they decided to go forward with wanting a new pistol. If the government decides they want to go with a new pistol and it's 9mm, they're wasting their money. The M9A3 is a perfect gun in 9mm. You don't have to go with all the expense of all the logistics of new parts. You can basically modify the pistol. However, if they decide they want to go with a new caliber, certainly it's a good idea. This pistol has served since 1985, and it's been very well liked by many. The ones who didn't like it, there was issues. Most of them were not due to the pistol itself. And you also have that crowd out there still to this day who will accept nothing but a .45. But given the constraints that the U.S. military had with NATO standardization, this had to happen. And they did get a pistol that was more reliable than the M1911, and one that was more durable, and one that was not nearly as sensitive to ammunition. Granted, that's more for law enforcement. This pistol is probably one of the most widely produced pistols in the world, used for militaries throughout the world. The interesting note was on the fact that it's so widely distributed. Those slide failures were only seen in the U.S. government with that group of SEALs, or with in training areas where the guns were basically just shot to hell, and no one kept round counts, and they shoot them until they break. So it was a unique American problem. But I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted to give you guys the real scoop on what happened versus all the fallacies, and I hope you found it interesting. Well, now we're going to take the M9 out to the range, and we'll run a few magazines through it. Looking at some of the features of the M9, which really made it look very favorable to the U.S. government over the 1911, was the ability to carry the gun loaded safely. With an M1911, you would have to carry it with the round in the chamber and the hammer cocked and in the safety position. Where with the Beretta, you were able to actually load it, the slide. Now you have the hammer in the cock position, decock, and you're able to safely decock it. Now I'm in a complete safe position, so I can carry the gun safely with the hammer forward. Or I could engage it, the safety, or disengage the safety. Now I have the hammer in the forward position. So now I carry it like a double action revolver, with your first shot being a heavy double action pull, and it goes into the single action pull. As you can see by watching the hammer, after it fires a shot, now we're automatically in the shorter single shot. And every shot after will be the short pull. Now I can engage the safety back into that position. Now the gun can be carried safely. Again, with the M1911, for a couple reasons. One, it would have to be carried in this condition with a safety engaged. The M1911, even in a condition of cocked and locked, was not that safe. There was no firing pin block. So if the gun was to be dropped from waist level on the muzzle, there was a very good chance that it would discharge unintentionally. In fact, during my time as a forensic scientist, I had a case which involved an M1911 that the police officers claimed that they were shot at, and then when they were found out that that was not the case, the pistol was actually dropped and it went off. determine that. The M1911 has what's called a passive firing pin lock safety. You can see it right in the top here. With it in that position, the firing pin cannot move no matter what happens to it. When you pull the trigger to the rear, you can see how it disengages, and then when the hammer strikes the firing pin, it will allow it to fire. But if you notice, until the trigger is pulled all the way to the rear, it will not disengage. Also, with the safety engaged, if you look, the firing pin is actually rolled out of the way. Firing pin's engaged, it's in two pieces, now it's disengaged. So even with that like that, I can let it go forward. There's no way the firing pin can actually connect. So this gun is extremely safe to carry loaded, with or without the safety on, which was a big benefit over the 1911. And again, it carries 15 rounds instead of 7, but it does carry the smaller 9mm caliber projectile. However, the recoil on this thing is so minimal, your average shooter or your new shooter is able to shoot this effectively, where with 1911 they are not. And also the sheer reliability of this handgun is legendary due to its open slide design. We're going to fire off a few more rounds here. Now let's take a look at the inside here. If you notice the way this round is here, it's going right into the chamber. There's not really any ramp, there's no ramp that's needed. The round goes specifically into there. You have a fully open ejection port. What that does is when the pistol goes to eject, there's absolutely nothing for it to catch on to cause it to have a failure to eject. The one thing that's going to cause this pistol to have a failure to eject is if you have an underpowered cartridge where it doesn't knock the slide all the way back. Some people claim that this is is not as reliable as other guns because it is open. In my experience, I've never seen that. I've done a 20,500 round endurance test on the M9 pistol, and I had one failure, and it was due to a locking block failure at just over 19,000 rounds. We've had sand in it, we've had dust in it. Pistol works 100% reliable. So we're going to fire a little bit more here. Notice there's not much of a muzzle flip to it at all. The recoil on the Beretta pistol is also very unique too, in the fact that the pistol pushes back at you, doesn't snap up at you. That's due to the locking mechanism, period. If you can look at the locking block right here, these two wings right here, as the slide comes back, it drops out of position and the slide comes back. Where with the traditional Browning type locking mechanism, the barrel actually drops down as the slide comes back. So with this one, you get more of a push back rather than a snap upward. The recoil is very unique compared to most of the modern pistols in the industry right now. This has been around the U.S. military since 1985, and only up to right now where they're actually looking to replace it. This will be a very interesting program to see what they choose to replace it with. If they're looking to replace it with a 9mm, looking at the cost, there's no reason to replace it. If they're looking to go with a new caliber, they definitely could improve it with the caliber. There's also been rumor too that the military is going to be allowed to use hollow point ammunition. Again, if the military is allowed to use hollow point ammunition, there's no reason to go away from the 9mm. Some of the newer ammunition, such as the Federal HST and the Gold Dot, that ammunition would perform just as well as a larger caliber would. Thank you for watching my video on the Beretta. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, please click like and please subscribe. Thank you.